Hi, I'm Ken Fisher. Welcome to the 17th season of CityWide. All year we're talking about the big issues impacting the lives of New Yorkers. My guest on this edition of CityWide is David Van Zandt, president of the New School. Thanks for joining us.
Pleased to be here.
So the New School, founded in 1919,
Yes.
almost 100 years old. Doesn't sound so new to me. Tell our viewers what the New School is and why it's important to New York.
Well, the New School has been a New York institution for that 100 years, and it really started as an adult education school. It was created by a couple of faculty from Columbia who came down and felt that there wasn't enough free discussion and debate going on up there, and they really opened themselves to the local community, bringing people in for classes and courses. No degrees were handed out. It was just a place where people discussed politics, social issues. And then also in the 20s, we developed quite an arts programs, whether it was dance, drama, fine arts, where people, again, could come in and take courses.
And what's new at the New School?
Well, the New School has undergone a lot of changes in that 100 years. I like to talk about the New School all the time because it's really important for us to keep changing depending upon the needs of the community, the needs of society. And I think where we are today is really looking at what's happening in the economy in New York City. The economy in New York City is really focused a lot on the creative economy. It's an important part of what we do. Higher education, of course, is a big part of our economy as well, and the New School participates in that. But we really feel that we're now producing students to go into that environment, into that creative economy, and really make a difference. The New School has always been based on creativity and social engagement, and it just takes different forms as you go through the years.
So I guess probably the best-known program, maybe the Parsons School of Design,
Yeah.
and that's both undergraduate and graduate.
Mm-hmm.
Are most of your programs the same? Is it heavily focused towards graduate programs, or undergraduates, or both?
That's changed over time. Today it's probably 5,500, 4,500, 5,500 undergrads, 4,500 grad students. We do have some programs that are completely grad. Parsons, by far and away, is the biggest of our undergrad programs. We also have the Eugene Lang College of Liberal Arts, which has about 1,400 undergraduates in it.
Where do your students come from?
They come really from all over. The biggest pockets within the U.S. come from the Northeast, New York City, Northeast, and the other pocket is in Southern California, that part. But the New School is, of all the undergraduate institutions in this country, it has the largest percentage of international students. We're at 20 to 25%. Parsons itself is 40% come from outside the U.S.
I saw a newspaper story recently about a change in the study of history.
Yes.
And one of the New School professors was quoted as having pioneered a class on the history of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't the history of capitalism just history?
Well, it's just history, but I mean, history divides itself up into different areas. That was Professor Julia Ott, who is both at our New School for Social Research as well as at Eugene Lang College. And she was the first person hired to a line entitled The History of Capitalism. And she's done a tremendous job with that. We're very proud of that.
What would you say the school's reputation is? It's not NYU.
No.
It's not an experimental school anymore after 100 years. But I think if you take out the fine arts and the music program and some of the others, I guess it kind of has a reputation for being a school with an ideology. And I don't know if that's a fair characterization or not.
You know, my own view of that is I think it developed that reputation probably in the 60s and 70s. It was most sharp then. It began as a progressive school, certainly. It was open to full debate, free flow of ideas, a high level of tolerance. There were some members of the faculty who were very liberal, and there were members of the faculty who were very conservative throughout the early parts, or all the way up until the 60s or 70s. I think with the war and the general climate, most universities became more left-leaning during that time period. Today, I think what you're seeing both at the New School and other places is we still have a strong commitment to social engagement and public action in making the world better, but the way we do that now is not necessarily just politics. It's design, it's creativity, it's ways to make the world better around us in a variety of different ways. And that to me is really the future of the New School. How do you make the world better through designing it more effectively?
I would think that starving artists and public interest-minded people don't necessarily provide the greatest endowment base for a college.
Yes, yes.
And the way that some of the Ivy League machines
right.
can tap into that. Talk to us about the business of running a university these days. Is it hard? Is it worse than it used to be? And are you in this sort of endless chase for dollars that blocks out the sun on other things?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you should mention the endowment, because the New School's founders, when they started, they said there are three things about it. They wanted to have no full-time faculty, no buildings, and no endowment.
How'd that work out?
Well, it worked out. It's interesting. It worked out. We got very quickly on, within 10 years or so, full-time faculty. We had our wonderful Joseph Urban building down on 12th Street, built, finished in 1931. We somehow forgot about the endowment part, and we do have an endowment, but it's not nearly the size of the Ivies or other sorts of schools. And we're largely a tuition-dependent institution, and frankly, most higher ed institutions in the country are tuition-based. We hear about the big endowment at Harvard. Harvard's endowment, I understand, pays about 37% of their operating costs. Ours is just a small number of percentage points.
You were a dean at Northwestern Law School, and I just digress for a second. I'm a lawyer by training, as you are. I can't wrap my head around law school tuition these days. Programs that basically just require classrooms and professors are more expensive than undergraduate programs that require big physical plants and athletic programs and museums and galleries and libraries and laboratories and things.
Right.
Why is law school so expensive, and is it a good deal for students? Again, I know that the New School doesn't have a law school, but I'd really like to hear your take on that.
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, you're talking about something very interesting in higher education, which is discrimination in pricing. That is, charging different prices for different programs, and there's some universities starting to do that. Historically, law schools, have been able to charge a lot of money because there's been tremendous demand for people going to law schools. And I think it's, my own view of law schools, having come from there, is that that's caused a bit of a structural problem in that we tended to raise the tuition a lot, and then we would spend the money, and now it's getting very tough. People are not applying to law school nearly as much as they used to, and it's tough for lawyers coming out right now. And I just read this morning a school down, I think it's University of Arizona, reduced their tuition by 11%.
So they're responding to the market. It's also, I think, something most people don't realize is that if one walked into your freshman undergraduate class this coming September, that virtually every student would be charged a different tuition depending on whether the school thought that they needed to induce them to come or their family circumstances. It's just a suggested manufacturer's price now. It's almost a little bit like haggling the way you would for a car. Is that healthy for higher education?
It's hard to tell. I think we've gotten into this pattern where we have a sticker price, as we call it, inside, and then, but most people don't end up paying that. There's a reduced price through financial aid for many, many people. I think it's healthy in the sense that it makes schools far more accessible doing it that way. The problem I think we're running into today is that the sticker price has gotten so high that it actually scares people away from applying, even if, if they had applied, they would have gotten substantial financial aid. And I think you're seeing now parents being very questioning about, is this degree really worth it? Should I be paying that much money in order to send my kid there?
And are admissions at the new school needs blind? In other words, when your admissions committee is evaluating applications, does it matter whether you think that family can pay full freight?
No, it really doesn't matter at all. Now, where it starts to matter a little bit is at both in the waiting list area, where you have to look at what your class is and how much tuition on a net basis you can actually bring in. You worry about that. But when we start out, it's really, we're looking for good people, and then if they have financial need, we try to do the best we can to meet that need.
I want to talk a little bit. We may run this over into the second half about the new school as a neighbor. How many buildings do you have now, and are you expanding your physical footprint in the city?
Well, first of all, the new school has always been, right in that area, Greenwich Village. It's always been open. I like to think of it as almost an open university for that area, allowing people to come in. That's an important part of our legacy, is the ability to have let people come in. We probably have, if you count dormitories, we have in the range of 10 to 15 buildings. I couldn't give you the precise number, but we're actually going through a process now. We are just completing a very large building on the corner of 5th Avenue and 14th Street, a beautiful building that resonates with the original architecture from Joseph Urban in our original building. We're actually consolidating a lot of our operations. We're moving our Manus School, our classical music school, down from 85th Street and 65th Street down onto the main campus. We're also moving Parsons Fashion School, which has been up on 40th Street, down to the main part. We're getting rid of some of our dorms that are further away, because our new building will have 600 spots, dorm spots. And so we're trying to consolidate everything around the Greenwich Village campus.
We're going to talk about the new school and other schools as neighbors when CityWide continues right after this.
Ma, guess what? I went back to college. No, I didn't quit my job. I'm finishing my degree with a CUNY Online Bachelor's in Business. I interact online with real City University of New York faculty on a schedule that fits my busy life. Ma, you should look who's teaching at CUNY. And it all leads to a high-quality Bachelor of Science degree in business. I can attend class anywhere, anytime. Yes, Mom, even at your house Friday night for dinner.
The CUNY Online Baccalaureate. Get back to business.
Welcome back to CityWide. We're speaking with David Van Zandt, president of the new school. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about the new building that you've just finished on 14th Street. Moving out of the 80s and the 40s and consolidating downtown, because that's some probably valuable real estate that you have to sell right now. I don't recall hearing much controversy about your new building. If you look at the cities that are rated every year as the best retirement communities, they're mostly college towns. So there's something about them that drives it. But in New York, there's been pushback about the expansion of NYU in your neighborhood, Columbia. Are universities in an urban setting good neighbors, and how can they be good neighbors? What are the things that make them a good neighbor if they are?
Well, I think they can be good neighbors, and I think that's what we're trying to do, and that's what our history has been, is being open and being a place for people to come and take courses, to meet. We continue to have a very strong continuing education program at the new school. I also think it sets the tone for a particular area, and having students come in and out. You have to manage it. I mean, you have to be careful. The students need to understand they're living in a vibrant community and be part of that. But that's part of our responsibility, is to help educate them that way. But I only see very positive things from it, both for us, but also for the residents around a place like the new school.
This may have been before you came on board, but I seem to recall a branding campaign a few years ago. It was the Parsons, the new school for design, or this was the new school for that. It seemed kind of contrived. So what happened to that?
Well, you know, we still call the different parts, like Parsons, the New School for Design, Eugene Lang, the New School for Liberal Arts. We still use those monikers, but there was the New School grew up by acquisition, by putting together different kinds of activities you wouldn't necessarily have thought went together over time. Parsons itself came into the New School in 1970 because it was essentially bankrupt and was going under. Manus came into the New School in the same way in 1989. So there really wasn't sort of a strategic idea up front about how to put these together. And I think those campaigns were an attempt to put it all together. I think the earlier campaign we were calling ourselves the New School University. Now we're back to just the New School, which I think is simple enough. And you know, one of our challenges is to make people aware of what's actually in the New School. Many people know Parsons very well, and they've heard of the New School, but they don't know that Parsons and the New School are part of the same entity.
Education itself seems to be going through a period of remarkable restructuring. There is a new emphasis on, I guess, lifetime learning. People who have to become retrained because the skill sets that they learned have become obsolete, or they need technical information. Right. At the same time, at the front end, students seem less prepared for college than ever before. Could you talk a little bit about both of those things?
Yeah, I think we're starting to realize that education really is a lifelong process, and that high school, college is not the beginning and the end of the educational process. And so the New School has always been in the forefront of that, going way back with our continuing ed. I mean, we really attracted people not only in the Greenwich Village area, but from all over the city who were coming to either learn some skills, or sometimes it was to just educate themselves in a way that maybe in the past they hadn't been able to do. So I think that's an important part of it. At the other end, and we're, you know, as I mentioned before, majority undergrad institution right now. The question is, colleges and universities are, you know, faced with a secondary school system all over the country that brings in kids that are less prepared than they used to be, which makes their job even more important. And the New School is very good at that, because at our undergraduate level, you know, they are largely small classes. We're the university in the U.S. Ranked #1 in terms of most small classes, and that's where, you know, faculty have to work with students, whether it's their writing or in their studios, on bringing them up to speed very often.
If the chancellor of the New York City school system was watching this show, and you wanted the chancellor to hear one thing that you would like the New York City schools to do better, what would that be?
You know, I would say it's like all secondary schools to do better. It's not just not New York City, but it is to have students who have enough of the basics in terms of writing, reading comprehension. I think more and more today, quantitative skills of one form or another, including things such as programming. I mean, you see today, we see a lot of jobs today out there for our students coming out where programming is a very good thing.
So is the way to make that happen through testing and teacher accountability? Is it the method of teaching? Why aren't the students as prepared as you'd want them to be?
Well, I'm not an expert in that area, and I could only surmise. I think it's, you know, I think it's because we probably haven't invested enough in education. You see, as we cut budgets, around the country, higher education, even public education, is getting cut. And I think, you know, money's not the answer to all things. You have to use the money well, and in one sense, it may be the public's reacting to they felt the money wasn't used well for a long time, so they live with these cuts because the ones that can go off to private schools. But it's a serious, it's the same problem we have with infrastructure generally in this country. We haven't invested enough in it, in my view.
So is technology the answer? We now have these massive online classes, celebrity professors, or simply people who are engaging, teaching. Is that a positive trend?
I think it's a positive trend, because what it's doing is putting pressure on us in higher education. We can't keep doing the same thing we've done year in and year out. while I don't see the MOOCs replacing higher education, I think what they're saying is, do you really need to have a large lecture with a very expensive building and a full-time faculty member when we can get something very equivalent to that over through technology? So it's really the challenge that place puts on us.
And what about the notion of a online-only degree? Is there, putting aside cheating and whether people lose interest, but,
sure.
is a student who got an online-only degree as prepared for life as a student who's had an in-person experience?
I think it really depends on the subject matter of the degree. We do have a small number of fully online degrees, and we have one, for example, in teaching English as a second language. That's probably something, and they also do some, they do some practical work outside of that, but that's something you probably can do pretty effectively. There are other things that you can't. A lot depends on what you think the goal of higher education actually is.
So what is the goal?
Well, I think it's to prepare citizens for contributing to society and to the world, and that's a very general way of putting it. But I do think it requires giving them a certain level of competencies in various ways, whether it's through communication or through writing or through basic understanding of quantitative issues. At the New School, we're really focused on doing that plus what we call the creative competencies. Because we want students who are looking a particular kind of student who is looking at the creative economy, wants to go into that. And so there are things like, being able to see patterns that other people don't see, being able to deal with, failure, and how do you actually come back and learn from failure. And finally, design learning, design education is all about working on multidisciplinary teams, and that's really a forte of the New School.
Is having an international perspective also important?
Yes,
It seems like young people today many of them are expecting to work in foreign capitals. Their classmates and office mates come from diverse backgrounds. Is that something that just comes from interacting on a daily basis?
Yeah. No, I think that does, and that's why I'm particularly proud of our mix of students we have with so many international students in it, because you learn day to day. Now, it's not perfect. Most higher education actually has almost been dragged kicking and screaming into that world, with students demanding study year abroad and semesters abroad and that kind of thing. We do all that as well, but there's nothing I think that replaces working side by side with someone from a different culture who has a different perspective on things, which you get to do at the New School.
What makes for an effective professor? Yeah. Is it that seeing the pattern that leads to the great paper? Is it just being charismatic and able to hold students' attention when they're competing? You don't know whether the student's using their notebook, their computer to take notes or be on eBay. What makes an effective professor?
Well, I think it's two things. One, I think it is having the ability to engage students and give them the content or the mode of thinking that and really in higher education, a lot of it's about mode of thinking as opposed to particular subject matters. We can always pick those. You pick those up on the web easily today. It's how do you think about problems? How do you analyze problems? How do you solve problems? The other part, that's the core of what a professor does. The other part, though, is the professor has to be able to convince his or her students that what they're teaching is valuable to their career. And I think that's a big problem sometimes, that professors tend to think that, well, I know what I do is very good.
Right, knowledge for the sake of knowledge.
Right.
So in terms of what a student gets out of it, clearly the amount that they receive, the exercises they go through, the ability to help them think. But when it comes to marketability, is a certificate enough? Is having attended a class enough? Is the degree a validator for the workforce that we're just never going to get away from? What's the marketplace view on all of this?
Well, I think there are many jobs where there's a discrete set of skills or abilities that you could meet or prove that you can meet through a certificate, or sometimes we call them badges for particular kinds of activities. I think long term, though, a degree or something like that is going to be very important because, yes, some employers have very specific requirements, but when I talk to employers today, and we do a lot of that at the New School, what they're looking for are people, particularly on the creative side, who can work with others well, who can solve problems, but also who can bring to bear a wealth of knowledge about how the world works, about history, in particular in the design area. It's so socially and culturally based. Not only do we have the international students there that help with that, but also we are really trying to educate the student broadly as opposed to just simply doing one very narrow thing.
So opportunities for students to learn how to learn.
Yep.
Substantive opportunities for them to learn, and opportunities for lifetime learning for anyone at the New School.
Exactly, exactly.
My thanks to David Van Zandt, president of the New School. I'm Ken Fisher. Thanks for joining us on this edition of CityWide. Send your comments and suggestions to CityWide at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or contact us at cuny.tv.